New demands from Senate Democrats for details on Justice Department payouts to President Trump's allies. Senators want specifics on 4 lawsuit settlements. One is related to the January 6th Capitol riot. Democrats claim the DOJ is using workarounds. And here's what Attorney General Todd Blanche said this week.
The president feels very strongly, as do I, that there were people who were victims of a Department of Justice that was absolutely weaponized. And he feels very strongly that he would want to make them whole, as do I. But it will not be through the Anti-Weaponization Fund, which, again, was never set up.
Joining me now, Ty Cobb, former Trump White House counsel and a good friend to us. Nice to see you there, Ty. So what we just heard there is Blanche effectively confirming this administration will find a way to compensate those that the president believes are victims of what he calls weaponization, and that could include violent Capitol rioters.
Absolutely. They have, they're very focused on trying to rewrite the history of January 6th to pretend that it wasn't the violent insurrection that the president fomented, and to reward the violent insurrectionists who assaulted police officers and Capitol police officers and fought their way into the Capitol, even threatening to hang Mike Pence. So, yes, they're going to do this. It's part of their white supremacy support with the Proud Boys and others. And they will find a way to try to do this. Hopefully the courts and maybe even Congress will find the courage to prevent it.
So yesterday, Todd Blanche spoke at a rally where the president was endorsing a Republican gubernatorial candidate. And this week, the DOJ put out a new memo saying that it plans to treat Trump's communications with outside advisors as privileged. How much, Ty, of a departure from the norm is this? And as someone who represented the White House during President Trump's first term, how do you see the role Blanche appears to be playing as Attorney General?
So in taking the extension of executive privilege first, the Constitution does not by any means support the interpretation that the Justice Department issued this week on the eve of, or actually on immediately after Blanche's confirmation. The extension of executive privilege to private parties has no basis in law or fact, and it's designed to cover people like Steve Bannon, who went to jail trying to fraudulently assert executive privilege, Navarro, who also went to jail falsely trying to assert executive privilege when none had been claimed, and actually Navarro was a government official at the time. So this is not for any other purpose than to hide Trump's corruption, his dealings with private parties that are designed to foment and persist in the dangers that are happening in America right now.
Let me ask you, the timing of this, is this something you think relative to the timing of Caroline Leavitt, who is leaving the White House at the end of the month to become a trusted outside advisor?
So I don't believe so. I think that sort of exaggerates her status, but it does protect Bannon, for example. Bannon was instrumental in many of the shakedowns that occurred following the president's ascension the second time, including the law firms who capitulated and donated hundreds of millions of dollars in pro bono time. People like Bannon and people who are more involved in the actual implementation of the president's activities, I think, are who this is intended for. I think Caroline is a convenient cover story, but I don't think she's significant enough, and I think most people will be delighted when Creepy Caroline slides into the background.
All right. Well, Trump is being sued over the scheme to sell early access to his Truth Social posts, where he announces major White House policy decisions. You know the going rate. It's $100,000 a month, $1.2 million a year, and he owns 41% of the company's shares. Among those, Ty, named in this lawsuit are his assistants, as well as the executive office of the president. And one of the plaintiff's lawyers says, in some ways, Trump is a, quote, Picasso of corruption. So is this scheme legal, and are there ethical concerns here or potential SEC violations?
So, yeah, this is a wholesale violation of the securities laws, selling presidential intentions and information in advance of the public receiving that information. That's at the heart of what the securities laws were designed to prevent. And the founders, if they thought this was ever going to happen, they would have said something to prevent it. I'm sure they never imagined that the country would be in the hands of someone as evil as this president, whose corruption is unprecedented, not just in America, but in history. And I think that the reality is this lawsuit is well-founded. It cites pretty good constitutional authority. It'll be interesting to see the way it winds through. But the real problem here is Congress could prevent this in a nanosecond, but they won't because they have been neutered by their cowardice.
So Democrats are also pressing for answers right now about an 18-karat gold ring that was given as a gift to Trump by a Belgian diamond trade group. It happened weeks before European diamonds were, exempted from tariffs. The ring is valued at up to $35,000. It features 321 diamonds, 56 sapphires, 13 emeralds, and 6 rubies, just for good measure. The Antwerp World Diamond Center says this ring was an America 250 gift and there's no connection to tariffs. But Ty, does accepting this ring raise ethics questions for Trump? I mean, what do you say to those who say Trump can be bought with gifts like planes and rings or over-the-top flattery?
Yeah, of course, this perpetuates the ethical concerns about the president and the foreign donations. Keep in mind, the UAE, spent $500 million to purchase their way into Trump's crypto venture, bought 49% of it. And just this week, that crypto venture was part of a deal that is going to allow them to open up a bank, which under the government regulations is something that is really highly concerning. But the $25,000, $35,000 ring, yes, that's another gift that no other president would take as a personal gift. You can receive gifts, but typically what happens is the presidents, like Roosevelt's tea set and Eisenhower's painting, they donate them to the White House and they're left there for the country. If this was a gift to America, it should stay with America and not go on the president's ring or be in his possession.
Yeah. Okay, so that bank that you mentioned, for anybody, because this is a new report, who's not familiar. Everyone, it's a new report in the Wall Street Journal. It says that Trump's family's World Liberty Financial, it gets preliminary approval to launch a bank. It is in a joint venture between the Trumps and Steve Witkoff's family. The crypto industry has created a huge chunk of Trump's recent earnings, and Trump's sons have invested in several companies doing business with the government. Do any of the publicly reported deals, Ty, warrant further investigation?
All of the publicly reported deals warrant further investigation with the Trump family and with the president and with his companies. Certainly, keep in mind the president declared, I mean, we don't know how much he really made, but he declared $1.4 billion in income last year from the crypto company, while most people who invested in crypto lost billions of dollars. This is something, as I say, the founders never contemplate. The rules for the ethical conduct by president and other government officials clearly prohibit. But he's doing it in your face. I mean, at $100,000 a month to Wall Street firms, $500 million from the UAE, diamond rings from other countries, in concert with tariff decisions. So this is corrupt, and I fully suspect that if the Democrats win the House, as we suspect they will, and if they can be lawfully seated over Trump's objections and Mike Johnson's objections, and once they take control of the House, we will get some transparency on many of these transactions. But again, the upcoming investigations are another reason for why Trump and Blanche extended executive privilege. They want to try to make witnesses, impossible to find, and it'll require a strong court battle to get them to the table.
Yeah, I have one more big question, but I want to pick up on something you said, and that is when you said "in your face." Is this what I guess makes the Trump administration say, "Oh, we're the most transparent administration in history"? And if so, does the word transparent have a different meaning for this administration than what it would say in your definition or even Merriam-Webster's?
So they don't say these things to persuade people. They say these things to make people wonder what to believe and thus become neutered. So they're not disappointed or they don't feel angry when they figure out the truth. They just feel numb. And it's like when the mafia used to gun down people in restaurants. It was a sign to New York City officials and others not to get in their way. This is a crime family operating at the highest levels never before seen in history, and people should be paying attention.
My EP tells me I don't have time for the one big question I want to ask, but it's a good one, and it's going to be out there for a while, so you must come back. All right? And we'll ask you then.
Please.
Thank you, Ty Cobb.